Hey guys, it's Kevin in my review for Turning Red. And this film, we do focus on the character of Maitreyi, or Maitreyi, and she is this, typical sort of 13-year-old student in the mid-2000s, loves boy bands, really wants to go to this concert and things like that, has this really tight-knit friend group, but she also is very much going through her own adolescence, and one day she finds that, there is this new curse that has been brought upon her that is a heritable one, where anytime she experiences just a little bit of strong emotion, she turns into this colossal red panda, and the rest of the film is basically how she ends up wrestling with this and how it ultimately changes her as a person overall. So, I'll be honest, when it comes to Pixar, I usually am very excited for them because they are by far the best animated studio working today. The way that they always find a way to appeal to both kids and adults with their films is something that very few animated studios can do in terms of the way they just perfectly strike that balance. And I think they've had some real big hits, and I'm not one to say that Pixar is in decline. I know a lot of people like to say that, but for me, aside from a few duds, they've remained consistent, even the past few years. Soul, I absolutely love. It's one of my new favorite Pixar movies. Onward, I really like quite a bit. I liked Luca last year. I haven't disliked a Pixar movie in a long time, but seeing the marketing for Turning Red, I just really wasn't that excited for this film. It just looked a lot cheaper. It didn't really seem like it was going to be anything that special. Felt like something more you'd see in one of their shorts or something like that, and it just didn't really feel like the kind of film I'm used to seeing from Pixar. It felt more like a DreamWorks movie, if anything, and I just wasn't really all that impressed by it. I wasn't dreading it or anything, but it really was just one of those things where it's a movie, it's coming out, and I hope it's good, but it didn't really look all that great. So going into this film, I didn't really have the highest of hopes, but I was still a little bit more interested in watching it when it was suddenly pulled from theaters, which was a piss poor decision on Disney's end for sure. Pixar animators, work very hard to make these movies, and to deny them that opportunity that they've been given, I think is just very disrespectful overall, and that made me a little bit more interested in watching this movie because I wanted to really support this film. I was really hoping that this film could be something special. And I have to say, having watched this film, this is a much better movie than I have really given it any sort of credit for prior. Turning Red is easily one of the most emotional and relatable films from Pixar, and also one of the most daring films that I think I have seen from them in a very long time, and really just ended up blowing me away in so many different aspects. But we are just getting to right now. Starting off with the voice cast here, this is something that Pixar always does an amazing job with. They always seem to find the right talent for these roles and whatnot, and this film is really no different. But what really impresses me about this film is that this isn't a film where it's let's get a bunch of big name actors and they're gonna populate this entire movie. Actually, the majority of these actors aren't that well known, specifically its lead in Rosalie, Chiang, who is amazing here. I've never really seen her before, but after this film, I definitely think that she is going to be potentially a household name in terms of voice acting, because she just gives such a incredible performance here. It just feels so natural and raw, and everything that Maitreyi is going through in this movie, you are totally on board with. And there's so many scenes in this movie that could have come across as very annoying or awkward, and I think Chiang really did a great job of finding a way to just make this feel that much more authentic. It really feels like she just poured her entire heart and soul into this movie, and I just really loved what she ended up doing here. There's so many different complexities when it comes to Maitreyi as a character. There's so much that she's dealing with, and this is just such a impressive breakthrough performance, and I really hope after this film, we're able to see her continue to attain roles like this in the future, because I really love what she ended up doing in this film. I think she has such potential as an actress, and every single beat, I think she just delivered perfectly in this movie. She was funny, she was likable in that way, and really just someone I really found myself getting on board with, and I really love what she ended up doing throughout this entire film. And the rest of the cast also is very good here. I've not seen a lot talk about Sandra Oh in this movie, but she is great here. She plays a character that I think is honestly very hard to portray, because you have to come across as this mom that is very much this very helicopter type parent, very overprotective in that way. But O finds a way to not villainize this character. You actually are able to understand a lot of, why her character is the way she is. Why does Ming Lee treat her daughter in this way? I think O just did a really great job at making this character feel like a real person. She doesn't feel like this one-dimensional type villain, and I just really loved, again, the levels that O did to really make this performance stand out. I think all the performances here are really well done. Orion Lee is also so good in this movie. He doesn't have as much to do with some of the other actors, as some of the other voice actors, but he really did impress me, specifically in one scene in this film. I think he was definitely a big standout, as was everyone here. I think everyone really did kill it in this film. And once again, it's just another really great Pixar film in terms of voice cast here. But now we got to get to the directing and the writing when it comes to this movie, because I think in terms of directing, this is probably some of the most authentic I've seen in a Pixar film in quite a bit, because what, Domee Shi does in this movie really kind of feels like this is the film she's always wanted to make, because this film is very near and dear to her heart. If you don't know, a lot of this film is based on her actual childhood and the experiences that she's dealt with. And obviously, turning into a red panda, that's not something she's actually dealt with, but it's all metaphorical in that way. And she just does a really good job with this movie. I think that, in terms of comedy, way better than I expected here. I mean, I won't lie. The first 20 minutes of this film, I wasn't entirely sure I was going to be able to get on board with, but very quickly I felt the vibe of this movie, and I really like what Shi is trying to do here. The way that she tackles, adolescence and things like that. I think that her directing is really good. There's a lot of great comedy, very good situational comedy throughout this movie that I thought worked very well. But there's just as much emotion put into this movie, and I think all of that just balances out perfectly in this one. I really like what Shi ended up doing here directing wise. I feel like she had such a interesting style for this movie. There's so many places that she's willing to go in this film, dealing into some very mature topics, and a lot of directors I feel like would try to kind of shy away from that because it's trying to appeal more to kids and things like that, but Shi really went for it, and I think her directing here is just spectacular. It honestly is very surprising to me it's taken her this long to get a feature-length, film within Pixar, but I'm so happy that she did, because I think she has a real future at Pixar as a studio. I think she should definitely be one of the, front runners in terms of directors, with Pixar and whatnot. Obviously, there used to be a lot of directors Andrew Stanton, Pete Docter. I would throw Domee Shi in there. I would definitely throw her in there, because I think she has such a interesting sort of creative approach, and I really love what she ended up doing throughout this entire film. But getting into the screenplay here, that's really what impresses me about this movie, because I feel like this film just hasn't gotten enough credit. I've seen a lot of people say, I can't get on board with this movie because of the movie centering on this 13-year-old kid and her being obsessed with boy bands and her wanting to go to a concert and things like that. But I feel like that's not giving the movie enough credit. Distilling this film down to just that basic plot line is really just not, I think, is not reflective of what this movie really is. Because what this film actually is very much this allegory for both puberty, but also the idea of, growing up and independence and things like that. And I thought all of that was really well done here, because, yeah, obviously, Mei Lin is this typical 13-year-old girl who is obsessed with things that people in the early 2000s would be. There's a lot of great nostalgia and things like that, but that's not all this movie is. I think Mei Lin as a character is actually a lot more complex than people are giving her credit for, because yeah, that is who she is on one hand, But then when she's around her mom, she's a completely different person. She struggles with anxiety. She struggles with, awkwardness and things like that. And a lot of it is because her mom is putting this immense pressure on her. She has such a specific way of viewing things, and the way that she is so overly critical of things that her daughter is getting herself involved in, whether it's the music she listens to, the way she dresses. She's so like posh in that way. And I think generally the movie does a really good job at showing just how how conflicting both of these lifestyles are for Mei Lin. The girl that she wants to be versus the girl that she's told she's supposed to be. And I thought that was a very sort of interesting dilemma for this character to go through. And when this, red panda kind of comes into the mix, it really kind of brings out this side of Mei Lin that she really hasn't been able to express before. And again, there's so many great sort of allegories here when it comes to being a teenager, and that's something that I think is really well done in this movie. Like, yes, there's a lot of allegories about puberty, about womanhood. There's a lot of stuff this movie talks about, but the idea of emotional repression and parenting, these are things I don't think enough people have talked about when it comes to this movie. And I think that's something that is really well handled, that this movie dives into when it comes to Mei Lin. And again, the relationship with her mom, it's a very rocky one. She often is very terrified of the way her mom is going to react to things, and she feels relief when she is suddenly away from her, because she feels like she can be more independent in that way. And becoming this panda finally gives her this rush. It gives her this sort of it gives her this freedom that makes her feel like she can be more like herself. And I really enjoyed the way that they ended up doing that. I really like the story that they ended up telling here. A lot of films would use this panda as sort of like this crutch in the film. Like, this is something that Mei Lin doesn't really want. But from the get-go, she is a lot more welcome to the idea of embracing her inner panda than you would expect. And I really like the way the film does dive deeper into that. I think all of that is really well done in this movie. And what I really related to when it came to Mei Lin is, again, just that anxiety that she has in this movie. That's something I really did relate to. This person that, you kind of like lock up and you're told like you can't be like this, but you should be like this. That's something that I did find quite relatable in this movie. There's a scene, it's gone viral on Twitter, with Mei Lin and her, liking this boy, and her making this drawing, and then becomes a lot more slightly suggestive, and just little things like that I thought just did such a great job of showing us who this character is, giving us an idea of what she goes through. And I thought all of that was just really well done throughout this movie. And again, just giving a lot more credit to this film than I think it really and I just want to give this film a lot more credit than it really has gotten overall. But then you contrast that with her mom, who I think is also a really well written character, because again, this isn't just this like generic sort of one-note character who is, very much just this protective mother. She has her reasonings for why she's this way, and I really just found myself really connecting to her as a character. I feel like there was a lot more depth given to her than you would have expected, especially when we start to see the way that maybe her family has treated her, and the effect this has had on her life. I just really found myself connecting to this character, and it became this really interesting sort of story about the parallels between mother and daughter, and sort of the experiences that they're having on each other. And that's something, again, I just was not prepared for in a movie like this. So she has this sort of vulnerability to her that you really find yourself latching onto. She has probably the most emotional scene of the entire movie. I mean, there's one scene with her especially, and I was just honestly near tears the way they ended up going about it. And I just really loved what they ended up doing when it came to this relationship. They could have easily made this feel a lot more superficial in that way, and it doesn't. It feels very natural. I think anyone who's had some sort of struggle when it comes to parenting, or maybe didn't have the easiest upbringing. I think they're going to find themselves relating to this film. And I think, even if you didn't, I think just the idea of, Sandra Oh's character not really wanting to give her daughter the freedom because she doesn't really want her to grow up and things like that. I think, again, all of that is just so deeply relatable to a lot of people. And I think all of that is very well written. But don't get me wrong, this film is still very funny. Like, there are a lot of moments that had me dying of laughter here, specifically moments involving the panda. The way that Maitreyi really kind of uses this to her advantage, I thought was really fun here. They do a lot of really clever things when it comes to this character, and I really liked a lot of the comedy throughout this film. There were some moments that just had me absolutely dying of laughter here. There is one character in this movie, and there's a direction they take with this character, and oh my god, I did not see it coming at all, and it made it that much funnier that they ended up going in the direction that they did. So that's something that I really did appreciate. And because of the fact that this movie is so funny, those emotional moments really do kind of sneak up on you. This isn't a movie that is emotionally manipulative in that way, because again, it gets you into this sort of rhythm. This is a very a constant, it's a very fast-moving film. The comedy is like gangbusters and things like that. So when those emotional moments do appear, it's that much more effective. And that's something I think Pixar has always done a great job with. They've been getting a lot of criticism lately for being too emotionally manipulative, and I've just never really seen it. And I feel like this film is a really good example of how well they handle those kind of like hard-hitting moments. They do an amazing job with that in this film, and I was very impressed by what they end up doing. Again, yeah, there's a lot of references to like early 2000s stuff that a lot of people will like, but again, it's those more tender sort of moments that just really connected me to this movie overall, and I think it definitely deserves a lot more credit than I think it's been given. My god, though, the animation is just out of this world in this film. And look, it's Pixar. We expect for them to have really top tier animation, but the way they really like push the boundaries in this movie is something that I was so immensely impressed by. I was honestly just so in awe of what they decided to do. This is easily some of the most colorful and visually striking imagery that Pixar has really ever done. I mean, just the design of the panda itself, there's so many like little details, the fur and things like that just look so like tangible in that way. You can just like reach out and feel it, or the very realistic looking locations that really do feel like you are just plucked right into the 21st century. All of that is so well done here. But where this film goes in terms of like the rituals and things like that, because a big part of this movie is the actual ritual that is going to be performed. Like I said, this panda thing is seen as a curse by her family and their various reactions that, they have and things like that, and the rituals themselves, the way all of that is done. This movie really does go for it in terms of, creativity with its animation, and that's something I really did appreciate. And my god, it is a damn shame that this film was not given the theatrical release that it really does deserve. I know it was in a few theaters, but this film would have absolutely killed it in theaters. I think there was a very big missed opportunity here to give Pixar an original film that I think really would have been a big hit for them. I think between this and Luca, both of these films would have been huge hits for them, and it's very unfortunate that this film it never is going to get that treatment. And I really hope that Disney just like kind of gets their head out of their ass and starts looking at like the bigger picture here, because I think there's something to say about a movie like, say, Sing 2, a movie that gets a big theatrical release and is still in theaters because of it. It became the most, well-performed animated film since the pandemic, and that's because that film was theaters only. But something like Encanto, a movie that's still a pretty big cultural phenomenon, really only became popular once it went onto Disney Plus. In theaters, it did not perform quite as well as the studio may have wanted. So again, I think Disney just really needs to kind of look at their priorities here. I think movies like Soul, movies like Luca, and especially now Turning Red, I get obviously why Soul was delayed, but was not given the theatrical release. But this movie especially very much should have gotten one, and it really is just such a unfortunate circumstance that it was not able to be given that proper release, because I think it just would have absolutely killed it. I think it just would have absolutely dominated in terms of like box office here. And there's so many scenes that would have been just amazing to see on like the big screen. But I mean, again, it doesn't take away from just how incredible this animation is. And I really love what they end up doing here. The soundtrack as well is very catchy in this movie. Four Town, the boy band that Maitreyi and her friends are obsessed with, is actually really fun. There's a lot of songs that I really did like in this film. And I thought the way all of that played out was very well done here. And the score from Ludwig Göransson is just as good as you expect it to be. It's very influenced by like, you know, Chinese culture and things like that, and I thought he did a really good job of like diving deeper into that. What I always love about Ludwig Göransson is that he doesn't just focus on like the vibe of the movie. He really tries to kind of make the film correlate with the culture demonstrated in the film, and I think that's something that, again, he just does a really excellent job with. He's one of the best composers working today, and this film very much does remind you of that. The editing to this film as well, I think, is very well paced. It's very fast paced, and the third act especially was just incredible, the way everything did play out. In terms of issues, like I said, you know, the first 20 minutes not really working for me in the way that I was worried about, but honestly, upon reflection, that's not really a big deal. My only other issue with this movie is the friends that Maitreyi has in this film. And it's not the characters themselves, because I really did enjoy all of them here, but I just felt like the movie had an opportunity to flesh out her friends a bit more and kind of see their own sort of personal dilemmas, maybe relating it to what, you know, Maitreyi is going through a little bit, and they just really didn't do that. They're much more just like the fun, supportive friends, and they fit that role pretty well, but I just wish there was a little bit more to them, and I think they would have stuck out more if that was the case. There's some good little sort of like background storylines going on, but it's not something where it's like, you know, very overt in that way, and I think if the movie had maybe capitalized on that a little bit more, I think it would have been that much more impactful as a whole. Guys, Turning Red is really just such a wonderful film that really did speak to me in a way that I wasn't really expecting. It's certainly not going to be a film for all audience because, like I said, this film does take a lot of chances. It gets very strange at points, but for me, I just really was able to embrace everything this film was going for. It tells this great story about a complex relation between mother and daughter. It has so much to say about adolescence and puberty, but also the idea of, you know, independence and emotional repression and whatnot, and I think it's easily one of Pixar's most impressive features that they have released in quite a bit for the chances it takes. And yes, you know, it does have a much different target audience on the surface, but honestly, I really do appreciate that. I think, you know, Pixar as a studio, they need to evolve at some point. They can't just keep making the same kind of movies over and over again. So for a studio to make a film that's appealing to a different demographic, but still pulling in, you know, a whole new demographic and exposing them to just how amazing Pixar can be, I don't really see any problem with that whatsoever. I think it's amazing that Pixar is finding different, you know, stories to latch onto, finding different things to do. This far in, the way they're still able to tell original stories, I hope we just continue to see this for many decades, because I think when Pixar has an idea like this and they fully embrace it, they are just absolutely unstoppable, and there truly is nothing like it, and Turning Red is such an amazing example of that. I was so fearful going in that this was just going to be this very like one joke type movie and that's all this was really going to be, but thankfully, you know, while those first 20 minutes, like I said, I was a little bit concerned, it very much became something much better than I expected to be. It's so much more authentic. It has so much more to say than I was really expecting. And it ends up being, I think, one of Pixar's most impactful films in quite a bit that I think is going to hit a lot of people. So overall, guys, I was very much surprised by Turning Red, and I am going to give it an A. My God, I feel so bad with any sort of doubts that I had about this movie. Shame on me for thinking that, because this movie is really fucking great, and I really do encourage all of you to see this as soon as possible. It's on Disney Plus for free, so if you have Disney Plus, you know, you can watch it there. Sucks it wasn't getting a theatrical release, but, you know, at least I guess there's more exposure in that way. I don't know. I'm trying to think of positives here. Other than that, guys, this is my review of Turning Red. Let me know what you guys saw this movie. All left your thoughts on it. We'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.